Welcome to episode 67. I call it aggressive negotiations. Or, if you're going to be fancy, are X-Wing ships really like chess pieces? Tonight, we're going to kick the episode off by understanding and discussing game theory behind X-Wing. What I wanted to do is create kind of a series where we talk a little bit about game theory, how it applies, and kind of understand all the little itty-bitty pieces that go into it, right? And then at the end of every episode, take some of what we've learned and apply it to some mechanic within X-Wing. Tonight, for the series inauguration, we're going to be discussing a little bit about chess strategy and how it applies to X-Wing in particular with pilots, ships, and upgrades that are associated with it. And we're going to try to associate it with a specific chess piece, right? And the reason I picked this, right, is because to me, understanding what makes your ship special, right, or how it works inside of a list brings you closer to winning different games, brings you closer to having fun, right? And allows you to help teach other players, the inner mechanics of how X-Wing works. And the reason we kind of wanted to do this is because I want to have a series where we talk about list building, turn zero strategy, obstacle placement, objective placement, maneuvering, preparation for attacks like an initial engagement, sustaining your health throughout the game, and then how do you close the game out, right? And I felt there's no real good way to do this other than to actually sit down and kind of talk through the different mechanics. So if I was working on teaching somebody, game theory, in terms of chess, right? So I want to teach you, how does chess work? What are the different theories behind it? They're going to teach you what are opening moves. They're going to teach you about mid game. They're going to teach you about end game, right? And anybody that's watched the Queen's Gambit probably has a little bit of understanding without even having to study chess theory. And I'll be honest, last year when I watched that, I did not know chess theory was a thing. And I found out it's a thing. So, X-Wing's a little bit different, right? We do have, maneuvering. We do have dice variance, which is a thing. But I feel that you can boil X-Wing down and remove some variance pieces of it to create as much of a fine-tuned experience for yourself to win as possible, right? So tonight, that's what we're going to do is we're going to cover and we're going to be having a conversation about how different ships and pilots become chess pieces. And then we're going to also talk about what happens when you start adding upgrades to them. Do they become more? Do they become less? How does that all work? But before that, we have a guest tonight. Yes, we do. We have a guest, one of JJ's locals, or used to be local. Technically, it's not his local anymore because the dude up and left Florida. And I don't blame him because not a big Florida fan myself. I don't really like Florida much, but either which way, tonight we are going to have George on the show to talk a little bit about his list from Nova, as well as to have him help us talk through chess piece discussion. Without further ado, let me bring in my guest and my co-host for tonight. Please welcome Mr. JJ and Mr. George. How are you all doing tonight?
I'm doing very, very well. How you doing, George?
Hey, I'm doing well. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, and thanks for joining us. I hope it wasn't last minute that JJ tried to book you, because he does that sometimes. Like sometimes he'll be like message people at like 4 PM and he'd be like, "Hey, I would like you to join my show." And oh, by the way, this is what we're talking about. And people are like, "What are you doing,
dude?"
JJ?
It was like 5 minutes after he finished his last match for the qualifier, and I knew that he was getting into the cut. I'm like, dude, I got to have you on my show, bro. Congrats, man. Like,
yeah, I was already in my hotel room, just like about to pass out. To be honest, I was like looking at the text. I was like, respond later, and just passed out.
Well, either which way, welcome to the show. Thank you for joining us tonight. We'll get to your list here in just a minute, right? We'll get to your list in just a minute. What I wanted to do before that, though, I guess we're gonna get to your list now. What I wanted to do that before that is just to kind of talk a little bit, and just kind of see how you were doing, and let's talk a little bit about your Nova experience. So, I didn't get to go to Nova this year because there's too many conventions. It seems now for me to be able to attend all of them. Sometimes it's not even a financial thing. Sometimes it's just like I can't be gone like a full weekend every month from the family. It's just it's nice that in person is back, but I feel like I want to go to more and I just can't do it.
Yeah,
Nova's great. I really enjoyed it there. I think just getting to it, the location is, I couldn't put in a better spot, to be honest. It's like right next to the airport. So in terms of like location, getting to it, access, it's great. And once you're in there, like you don't have to leave for nothing. So it's a good experience.
Yeah. Well, that's good. And I always hear DC and I just think hellhole, right? Like I just think it's going to be overly priced. You're never going to be able to get anywhere. There's going to be a bunch of crazy, like January 6th people down there. I just always think that like I don't want to go to DC because of that. But you're telling me if I go next year, it's not that big of a deal then.
Nah, not at all. It takes like less than 10 minutes to get from the airport. And that's if they keep it in the same location next year for sure. But for the most part, yeah, it takes less than 10 minutes to travel to the airport. And I was in and out. I was a little bit worried getting out, but then I realized, oh, I'm getting up at like 4 a.m. in the morning to make my flight out of Nova. And I was worried because it was Labor Day weekend. And no, even that didn't hold me up. I was early.
And I ended up going to a Rammstein concert I had tickets for like the last like 3 years since COVID. So there was discussions about going to DC, but I just couldn't swing it. Didn't want to give up my Rammstein concert. But it sounds like you had a very pleasant experience there. So
I did.
So the first question I have to ask is, I went to Gen Con, and Gen Con was the first AMG type run event per se. I mean, they ran it, but they didn't run it. Like Dion, Dion ran like all the tournament piece of it for the stream, and then D was kind of like the master head judge and stuff like that. How did Nova go? Was D there? I didn't know if D was going to be there or not. And then
Dion? Or what do you mean?
D from Fly Better.
Dune
Oh
from,
no,
Dune.
I didn't. No, I didn't see any of the Fly Better guys there.
All right, so how was the judging? and did AMG hire outside people to do judging, or did they like supply the personnel themselves?
Well, people that I recognized was Paul Heaver. Paul Heaver was there, and then I recognized Chris Allen. I met Chris Allen for the first time there. Very cool guy. Very like just down to earth kind of guy. Like I never expected. I think my opinion of the crate personalities were completely different, and once I met them, they were awesome. I think they were just great people.
Well, that's good.
Nice.
So okay, so they did hire outside or bring other outside people that knew X-Wing in to run the
Yeah.
judging. So I feel a little bit better. So if we're going to grade Nova and we're going to grade AMG, so it feels like what AMG is going to do is not bring a bunch of their own judges. They're going to let people that have worked in the community judge for these tournaments, which is very exciting news for me because I always kind of wonder if AMG understands the rules sometimes.
Yeah, you're always worried about that, but from what I heard and what I experienced, like everything ran smoothly. I couldn't have like asked for better judges, to be honest. Everybody that was there knew the rule set, knew what they were doing. They started the games on time. There was never a delay. It was really real like smooth for the most part.
Just good, because at Gen Con, one of the things that they did poorly for side events was they didn't have Dion or D or anybody that we knew run them. They were like an outside company, and like some of those people didn't even know the 2.5 rules. So like my buddy that I went down with, him and I went together, and he wanted to play on Sunday, and I was like, nah, I'm just gonna, or Saturday, and I was like, I'm just gonna chill. Like I had enough X-Wing for a lifetime. And then he ended up dropping the last round because like half his opponents didn't know how to play, and they didn't know how to judge it properly. So it's good to hear that AMG is doing something smart.
Yeah,
at least with that.
Now, in terms of price support, did they have actually better price support, or like a good amount of price support for like players and stuff?
They had plenty of price support for everybody. I even ended up walking out of there with some extra stuff just by standing around because they just had way too much stuff left over from like
Oh,
previous years. So like a lot of it was like 2020 stuff, to be honest. But like, hey, it's free swag. Why not?
yeah, that's good to hear. Yeah, because
Yeah.
I know that one of the complaints that we heard from coming out of Gen Con was that there wasn't actually much at all to give out in terms of like cards and stuff. So it's always good when you at least you have something to take away from the event, whether you make it to the top cut or not. Just being able to go home and have like that exclusive like card or alt art to take home is nice that they provided that. So that's good to hear.
Yeah. The side events also had some really good stuff too. that you wanted to play. Like I didn't after like the second day or whatever. After I got eliminated, they had to talk me into it, and then they showed me like the prizes, and I was like, all right, fine, I'll keep playing. So it
Oh,
was
that's
good.
good. That gives me hope going forward because I did have like a legitimate concern, just based on some of the people that I talked to that went over to Gen Con, on how they were talking about that there was a lack of price support for that. I was just worried that that was going to be a trend going forward with AMG, but hearing that they did support Nova properly, with prices and actual side events being run, and them actually reaching out to different experienced players to help run those events, is definitely reassuring that the AMG is making sure that they take care of that aspect of the tournament, because you want to make sure that not only the people that are making to the cut get taken care of, you want everybody to that actually attends the event to have a great time. So
Yeah.
that's
Yep.
great.
Absolutely.
All right. Any other last thoughts on Nova? And if not, we can kind of get into your list and go through your list real quick.
For me, nothing. Like it was just a great experience. I definitely recommend Nova for sure. So anybody who's thinking about it on the fence, maybe for next year, just do it. Just just do it. It's easy to get into because, like I said, location wise, they picked a perfect place, and yeah, it runs smoothly. And I've been to
That's
it
great.
twice, so it's like even the year before it was like a memorable experience where like I forget who was judging that time. I think it was Frontline Gaming that was running the events there, um, and they did an okay job as well. So it was smooth both times.
Awesome. All right, so let's talk a little bit about your list. You changed it up a little bit since you won our Planning Phase Syndicate inaugural event here in July. I'm pretty sure this is slightly different than what you originally had run, because I don't remember a Lone Wolf on Django.
I did. I actually did have Lone Wolf on Django on there last time. Um, it's one of those upgrades too. Now that we're on it, it's one of those upgrades too that I'm actually thinking about changing. To be
Okay.
honest.
All right, fair enough. So let's go through your list, and why don't you go through the list real quick, George, and run it down, and then talk about what the changes were from the planning phase lists to this one, and we can kind of go from there.
Um, I think it was the same exact list if I remember correctly. Yeah, I don't think I made any changes. I can't. I don't. To be honest, it's like it's been a couple of months now since the planning phase. But starting from the bottom, I mean, had the two vulture droids there. One is DFS, or Doofus, rather. The hyena class bomber, with the where is it? Where is it? Did I mess this up? I think I messed it up when I gave it to you. I think I'm sorry. I don't have Discord missiles on them. I should have proxy mines on them. So I apologize for that.
Okay.
That's the wrong droid. I
Was
created the
it
wrong droid.
a
Yes.
bombardment?
Yeah,
Was it a
bombardment
bombardment
droid.
drone?
Yeah.
Okay. Okay.
Um, and then Grievous with like a typical loadout of outmaneuver, impervium, soulless one, and Django Fett with Lone Wolf, thermal detonators, Slave One title, Savage, false codes transponders, veteran tail gunner, and delayed fuses is what I've been playing with mostly. So, yeah, that's better. Sorry about that.
No, you're fine.
Nice. So from what I know is that you did very well on your day one, and then you ended up going to the top 16 against Crispy, as I understand it. How did that game work out for you? I know that he was running his famous FO
Yeah.
list.
Well, I mean, where I ended up, like I almost saw it coming. I was like, oh man, I'm gonna end up going against Crispy. he's uh he's the number one seed, and I was like, okay, well, I at least prep for it. I did face a similar list before on the day before, so like, which was Andrew Cox. I played him, and that was a tough game as well, just because just FOs in general, the FO bombers in general, they're tough to deal with. They're really tough to predict. What exactly they're going to do. Um, you're always going to get hit with a chaff cloud, so it's like no way to avoid it. So you
Yeah.
kind of have to like just tough it out and hope you survive, and wish for the best rolls after all. But it didn't work out like that with Crispy's game. Crispy's game was he's very he's been, you can tell he's had a lot of experience. He's ran multiple games with that list. Definitely more experience than I've had with mine. And that showed in our game. I think I got way too much in my head in our game facing this list again. Um, so yeah, it just didn't work out the way that I was planning.
Okay.
I think I locked
Any
myself
other?
in like a corner with Django for far too long, and like by the time I got him into the fight, like it was just like too late. It was assault, and he already generated enough points to like pretty much win on auto
Yeah,
rounds,
just
just
from
keeping ships close enough to the
yeah,
objective. So
yeah. So, during your day one, did you encounter any lists that you thought might that were interesting or anything like that? Anything that catch your eye?
um, I think both of the games on stream that I played against were definitely lists that I was not prepared for. Um, I expected to see a lot of Imperial lists going to Nova. So I prepped myself mentally with that, and then FO's list as well. Um, but there was one list where it was I think it was a Boba Fett, the Mandalorian, and Kanan Jarrus. That list, I don't know if you saw it on stream, but it was
Yes.
a very tanky list, and
Yeah.
it almost had me on tilt at some point when Kanan just wasn't not dying. Everything I threw
I
at him was
remember
like
that.
just
Yeah, I remember seeing that game, and my goodness, that Kanan was just tanking so many shots. But man, you pulled that out. That was a very good match.
thanks. And I was putting myself in bad situations too, like bringing in my droids, taking them off the rocks. They got hit with like the I forgot the name of the bomb, but they get hit with bombs, so they dropped the crates, and like it was just a mess. But ultimately, like you kind of saw it towards the end, where like I was envisioning Kanan going towards that top edge, and my two drones just came around and like pincered him with the Discord missiles, and there was no way he was
Yeah,
gonna survive
there's
that.
no
So
way. Yeah, the double Discord, that was fantastic. That was great. I loved it.
yeah, and I'm glad that Django survived because he was bleeding.
Yeah, he was. He had like two hold left. I remember. Yeah, jeez.
And then that last list that I played against was also caught my attention. I think it was one of those games that could have gone very differently according to initiative, road rules. Man, that changes the game a lot. Had I not had the initiative on some of those rounds, I think it would have been a different game.
Yeah,
So.
Yeah, and I think one of the things, like, so I have some experience with your list a little bit. I've actually been running that more with 4 droids than just the 3. But I've recently been playing more bombers, and I found that I feel the bombers live longer, no matter what. They can't get one-shotted almost ever, like unless it's some crazy like Luke shattering shot, trick shot crap shenanigans, then
Yeah.
they still can. I have had that happen to a droid, so, um, especially because they land in rocks. But so to me, the interesting call here, and I was going to ask you because it used to be Django had a staple. It was either Pelp or Dooku, and especially if you're only running one fire spray, it was almost always Dooku. Since they made the rules change, I've been running Savage Press um, almost consistently instead of over Dooku because that gives me 4 points I can then throw back into something else. Have you found less of a need to have Dooku or Pelp in your squad um, over the long run of things? Or do you find that your squad has been hurt enough that you might want to start moving back towards that?
I think ultimately I am going to experiment with that direction. This is what I started off with, is using Savage. But I think ultimately dropping Lone Wolf in the long run is the move. I was thinking about putting Notorious on there. Um, and then maybe Palp over Dooku is what my thought was. And we'll see how that goes. Obviously, I'll have to either decide on whether to also keep thermals, because I'm also toying with the thermals with proximity, but that would mean that I would also have to drop veteran tail gunner. So there's a lot of choices there that I would have to decide on. So I don't know.
So I do like the idea of Notorious on Django. The only thing that I have like the only combo that I really see that is because so hang on, first things first. So Notorious, while I do like the upgrade itself, it is a little harder on an Initiative 6 because you're always shooting first, so you don't get to take advantage of it. Obviously your droids or Grievous can take advantage of that strain, assuming that you coordinate that attack. But what I've been liking is the combination of Palpatine in addition to Notorious, because if you happen to have them at range 2, you can spend that force and use that to strain and stress your opponent after the attack, which would be actually really, really nice. But at the same time, it's like you also want that force for defense. So, I mean, it's situational, but I do like the combo Notorious with Palp.
Yeah, I've tested it out just a couple times. It was interesting, and it's sort of like also with Palp throwing out stresses out there on those. You kind of have a little bit of control of what your opponent's going to do. Somebody can't just like K-turn on you. With a red, anyways, red maneuver. They have to do the blue maneuvers. You can control it a little bit. Yeah, it's a lot easier for your droids to get in there and get some shots in if it's a high agility ship too. So
yeah, I like it. I will tell you, I have been playing a little bit different Grievous as well. I have been putting a trick shot and shield upgrade on Grievous, and I think it's fun. I'll be honest. It's different. You have to you can fly Grievous differently, but I've actually found that in a game, outmaneuver gets off once or twice typically before somebody gets really annoyed and does not let that happen any longer. If I'm really lucky, it'll get off it all the time, but usually that doesn't happen. But I found with the trick shot and the shield upgrade, obviously the shield upgrade 100% always works. Like it's just now I've got almost a fire spray's worth of, because you have your 5 hull and 3 shields. You have 8 health now, so you're so close to that fire spray. Plus, if they roll crits, now you've got 2 more health, and you are literally a mini fire spray, like for 5 points. Like it's just insane to me. And I hope they don't change Grievous. So anyway, but I've been running the trick shot. I found I get off every other round roughly, depending on where obstacles are placed though. But I found, especially when I start my Grievous on one side and my Jango on the other side, they have to pick who they're coming in towards or split their forces. And if they split their forces, usually I'm going to dodge in between rocks and kind of go over to help Jango. And, if they don't, do, and they all come in on me, then, I'll slow roll and let Jango come in and, just hope Grievous tanks it and doesn't die. Right.
yeah.
But I tried Debris Gambit. It just does. It makes you very predictable, or you're always stressed. And I hate being stressed with Grievous for an evade. But I have found that was nice. If you can get your obstacle set just right and get Grievous just in there kind of the same way Pelp is, you can take advantage of that evade a lot, like insane amount.
Yeah, I can see that too. I personally I lean towards outmaneuver, just because like there's just something about it you can't turn it off, right? Like so your opponent can ignore it, and if he does, then it's kind of he's setting up himself for failure. I also like it for going up against opponents that have a lot of ships, like like a lot of TIE fighters, for example, where I just sent Grievous on a hunt for TIE fighters, basically, and he's usually able to pop one or 2.
Yeah. Well, and the nice thing about Grievous is you can sloop and not worry about that focus as long as you're not getting shot at. Like, who cares, right? Because I'm gonna sloop and I'm gonna take the re-rolls from being behind you. Plus, you get 1 less green dice. Yeah. Well, all right. Well, cool. Well, thank you. I think I don't have anything else for Nova unless you or JJ do. I have liked your list. We were very happy to have you win the event, and it's nice to see the list is still doing well and giving hope to separatist players all over the world.
Yeah, one of the few apparently. There was only 2 for my day, I guess, and I was the one that made the cut. And I was like, oh my gosh, the only separatist player.
Yeah,
So
that's
that
just
was
crazy to
interesting.
me.
Yeah.
I think I think since they did the points adjustment stuff, there's some crazy stuff that you can do. I have a secret sauce list. Maybe I'll share with you after the show or something like that.
Yeah, absolutely.
I have been playing it, and it's weird, but I'm literally 6-0 with it. So I've only played 6 games with it, but I am 6-0 with it. So
as long as it's separatist, I'm good.
it is. Well, it is 100%. It's a janky separatist list. This guy at my local built it with me, and like seriously, it's like, oh, all right. And actually, maybe we'll go through it if we have time. Maybe we'll go through it tonight after we do our chess analysis, right? Maybe that would actually be a good discussion point. I guess because I'm not planning on using it this weekend at the GSP things. But if anybody wants to run a separatist list in the GSP thing, that's really crazy. Let me know, and they can happily do it. So, all right. Let's move on to our next segment. So, as I said at the start of the show, and thank you, welcome Nick, and anybody coming from Nick's 312 Squadron. If you were watching earlier, you got to see me run a separatist list earlier tonight. Anyway, so that was I got to run a ZAM list. That was fun, and it's funny because the week before I ran a ZAM list as well, because we had to pick a pilot we hadn't played in forever, which I picked ZAM because I haven't flown. You don't fly ZAM at 9 points. You very rarely fly ZAM. But I got to run ZAM 2 weeks in a row. So it's kind of, I feel like taking ZAM out of the box and putting ZAM back on the table tomorrow at my locals, but I probably get yelled at.
I mean, she is really, really good. I mean, the last NJ or the last match I had with Nickel City, ZAM just was a powerhouse. I think I mean, I get that the 9 points hurts. I mean, she's the equivalent of Defender Vader in terms of cost, but man, can she put out some damage, man? Oof.
Yep. All right. Anyway, so we wanted for our main segment was to have a conversation a little bit about chess theory and the chess theory origins, right? So if we talk about like chess theory has been going on since, I don't know, like I'm going to just say 1500s, right? I think that's a good guess that at least that's at the current time it started getting documented about it. And essentially the way chess theory works is you kind of, it gets broken down into essentially 3 different types of strategies. And then each of those strategies has different tactics that kind of flow in between them. So you obviously have your opening maneuver. Your second strategy is your middle game. And then you have your end game, which, okay, that all sounds good and fine. That sounds logical, kind of plain, simple, yada, yada, yada. But one of the things that when I came from Star Wars Destiny was there was a strategy, there was a theory to how you build your decks and what your decks do. Kind of the same with like Magic the Gathering. You have burn decks, you have commander decks, which everybody seems to love, monster decks, all these different styles of decks and how they interact with other decks across the table from them. In X-Wing, we have a little bit more uniqueness, more closer to what chess is, right? Every chess piece has a set maneuver and can only do that type of maneuver. In X-Wing, we have these ships that can do set maneuvers. And then they can do fancy maneuvers based on, their abilities and taking stress and all these other things. So I thought, well, chess and X-Wing seem pretty similar, right? They logically, you can make the connect between the two. And I started doing research about 8-9 months ago when Queen's Gambit came out on chess theory, just because I found it interesting. I love that show. I thought that show was great. And I really wanted to get into like chess theory and say, hey, maybe I should play competitive chess. I have since found that I don't feel the ability to spend my dedicated time playing chess. I don't find it as fun as I find X-Wing. So I'm not going to do that. But the theories still apply. And so if we go through and we kind of talk about, well, there's different ways to construct the different phases inside of these different tactics, right? And you talk about opening knowledge. You could talk about tactics or combinations. You could talk about position analysis. You could talk about long-term plans, long-term goals that you have, and then your basic mate strategies. And that doesn't mean the dirty mating piece of it. It actually means how do you capture and conquer the king. So then I sat down and said, okay, well, if we think about X-Wing, we have what's called like turn 0, right? Turn 0 is essentially the way to kind of maximize your hypothetical and potential probability to win a game. It is not going to guarantee you the game, but it will increase your statistical probability of how you win the game. And if you go through chess theory, it's very similar. There's hundreds of different opening maneuvers, right, that you can do, and they all have different fancy names. And we're not going to get into every chess opening maneuver. Don't worry. This is not a chess podcast. In case I've lost anybody so far. Sorry, this is nerdy, geeky shit. I get really into this stuff. And like the last podcast I used to have was like a political one where I could get into like statistics and super detailed analysis. So now that I'm doing X-Wing, I have to like merge my two loves and like somehow put them together. And I love statistics. Anyway, so your zero churn is kind of where you can maximize where your engagement is. And it's kind of the same way in chess. Like when you start out, your opening engagement, how you present yourself, where you want to maneuver, decides your base strategy. And while I sat there and thought about that, I really wanted to get into turn zero. But then I felt that it seemed a little silly, right? Because turn zero talks about setting up objectives, right? Where do you want to place them? It talks about where do you place your scenario markers? Where are you going to fly your ships? How do you know where you're going to put them? And then where is your ship placement going to be? Plus your opening 2 to 3 turn maneuvers, right? And so then I sat there and said, okay, well, that's all good and fine. And turn zero is super important. But what we have to do is take a step back and look at the pieces that are on the board. And if we talk about list building, which we did, I think 3 weeks ago, we talked a little bit about list building. And I feel like we didn't do a good service to it in the long run, only because of the fact that when we talk about these things, we didn't actually look at all the different pieces in the chess game, right? We didn't look at all the different pieces of ships, how they interacted, how they maneuvered, what happens when you give them upgrades and all of that. So I said tonight, what I really wanted to do was understand how all the pieces work and how they benefited, how they can be used in turn zero, and kind of start assigning different pieces that we can put on the table to what chess pieces are. So what we're going to do is JJ's going to bring up, and he's going to bring up our lovely cards. I think that's what you're going to do, JJ? Yes. I think that's what you're going to do.
Let's do it.
And I'm going to switch our screen. That way you can see the cards that we have. So can you bring up a Vulture droid? Bring up the base Trade Federation drone, and then bring me up a Holocron droid, please. And we're going to start by defining each of the different chess pieces. So the first chess piece that should come to everybody's mind, right, is the fact that you have a pawn. And I'm okay if we want to actually pick a pawn out of every one of the factions. I'm okay with that too. Now, I don't think every faction has pawns, but I do believe that they're probably there, right? Can I request less Roger Rogers? Nabi, you can absolutely, but I think that's silly though, right? And so we're gonna talk through that. The other thing I want to point out real quick, and I know I've been talking a lot and I haven't given anybody else an opportunity a lot, but what I want to do is bring up the fact that, like, kind of like what Nabi says, right? So Nabi, holy crap, those cards are huge, JJ, by the way.
Yeah.
So what Nabi was saying is the fear fact that what we have is you can have different pieces to create a chessboard. And that's why X-Wing is so amazing, right? Is because you don't have to put pawns in your list. That's really small now. Can you make it bigger? You don't have to put just pawns in your list. You don't have to put 8 pawns in your list, right? That's the idea. Thank you. That's good. So you're killing me with that A-Wing there.
It's all for Nabi, man. It's all for Nabi.
So the idea, though, is a pawn is worth essentially 1 point value in chess terms, right? It's your lowest value piece. You always get 8 of them on each side. And these are the pieces that are designed to do obstructing, blocking, and trapping your opponents into incorrect moves, right? That's what they're there for. They're low-pointed ships. They don't do a heck of a lot. You really can't usually put a lot of upgrades on them. And I know AMG kind of has made like a little bit of a difference, right? Like they now give us millions of upgrades that we didn't. We used to be able to pick and choose. For example, how often did you trade Federation droids? And George, I'll ask you this. When back in 2.0, how often did you outfit Trade Federation droids with a bunch of stuff? Outside of grappling struts?
Nope, nothing.
Yeah, they were naked. They were just bare naked. You didn't do anything with them.
Yep.
You took it because I was like, it's a body that's what were they? 19 points. They were 19 points.
Yeah, there were 19 points
out of 200. You could put 8 naked things in there and like have points to give your opponent. Anyway, so sorry, I'm detracting. I'm going back to the good old 2.0 days. So anyway, so we go back and we talk about pawns, and pawns are used essentially as a base tool, right? So our base tool is meant to obstruct, to block, to do all those other different things. So now I'm going to kind of turn it over to the boys to say, hey, what are your thoughts like on pawns? Like where do you see the difference? Is there different techniques or different ships that can be considered a pawn that maybe are not just the 2-point fillers like we have up on the screen?
George, I'll let you go first.
I'm probably worse than going to this. Yeah, I'll pass it on to you, sir.
Oh my God, you're killing me.
So yeah,
Right.
so yeah, they're absolutely very similar to for like pawns in chess in X-Wing here. Specifically, when we look at the vultures here for the Separatist Alliance, because of their dial, they move very much like a pawn, right? Their best moves are going to be the ones that go straight or doing the hard turns. So when you're thinking about how you're going to move those particular pieces in the board, they're very one-dimensional, I would like to say, in terms of how they move. Because their fragility, their low health that they have on them and low defensive nature, they are not pieces that you typically expect to win one-on-one matches against like some of the bigger ships, because they're very fragile. So they're very good, especially in 2.5, to get objectives or to set up blocks on your opponents for your bigger hitting ships to come in, like your knights pieces or your rook pieces. And I'm using analogies for like the different ships, of course. And that's what they're there to do. They're there to go forward. They're basically your fodder that you're going to send in to try to gum up your enemy's position, try to get objectives while they're at it. And if they happen to take out a better ship than them, then that's great. That's a bonus. But they're mainly there just to go in, try to grab something, gum up, and just try to be a nuisance to try to get in the way.
Yeah, basically, you're okay with losing some. Like it's not the end of the world if you lose a couple of pawns, basically.
Yeah. So now I have a question. So for example, the Trade Federation drone has no loadout points. So if you're new to the show or you're new to X-Wing, right? The way that the points are built is we have a 20-point structure. And then from our 20-point structure, we have what's called loadout points. And they don't count towards your overall points. And games go to 20, right? And so what happens is as you're building your list, your specific ship and pilot will get a set of loadout points that you're able to build anything you want this on a restricted list. And Trade Federation drones currently now have 0 loadout points. Whereas the Holocron droid, which has an ability, gets 4 points of loadout. And those are all free. So the first question I have, George, right, is if I give the Holocron droid a Discord missile or a cluster missile, which is what I ran today, or if I give it a energy shell, does that change that Holocron drone from a pawn to another ship, or do we still kind of consider that a pawn because it's still a 3 health ship that's kind of like fodder?
Yeah, ultimately, I think it still falls into the pawn category. Yeah, it doesn't change anything for a droid, anyways, a drone.
Okay. Well, like I said, I just wanted to make sure before we went too far, because I think that's, like I said, that's the big thing there, right? Is that we have people we have some drones that get abilities now and have the different things, but really in reality, when we talk about fodder and blocking, an I1 is going to be. How about this I3 Green Squadron Expert? I believe they are they 4 points still?
Yes, they are.
Ugh.
You could be a glorified pawn. I like that word, that terminology, but it's still a pawn.
Yeah, still a pawn. Yeah.
Yep. So how about that green squadron extra? Do you feel that's a pawn?
Yeah, absolutely. I think that currently right now, they because of the low loadout, not being able to equip like high hitting ordnance. Yeah, sure, you could put like an ion torpedo or sorry, an ion missile onto them to like help give like that status effect onto your enemy. But without that big hit potential, just chipping away with 2 dice, sure, they're hard to take down, but at the same time, in this game with objectives, you can't exactly stay flying away all the time with the RZ2 A wings and expect to take out your opponents that have probably bigger guns and can possibly take you out because green dice can fail you at any time and that can pretty much take out your A wing at any point. So yeah, I would still consider them a better pawn, but they're still a pawn.
Okay. So they're a pawn that's worth a little bit more, but probably not worth 4 points. They're probably worth 3
Yeah.
points.
Yeah.
And ANG just doesn't know how to price things appropriately. How about Merle? Marl, however you say
Merle.
Coben.
Yeah. She's a pawn with special powers. I mean, Merle can definitely make bigger like rooks and bishops feel like a pawn when she gets them in the arc. But yeah, definitely really good.
All right. And so before we move on from pawns, the last couple I threw up there was an ISB Jingoist and an Iden, right? And I think if we talk there, I think there's kind of a little bit of a difference here, and that's kind of what I wanted to go through, right? So this Black Squadron Ace, here has no special ability. It is an I3, but it's really just out there to die for the most part. Even though it does have 3 agility, it is out there to die. We look at an ISB Jingoist, they bring a little bit more of a caveat. They don't have any charges, but they get 3 loadout points that give them illicit. And then they turn around and can give out anything at range 0 to 1, a strain, or somebody has to remove a green token. That's pretty good, right?
Yeah, I would almost make them into like a knight type piece, and my reasoning for that is that they have the potential to affect their opponents, their opponent's stats, right? Either by removing a token or by giving them a strain. And if your opponent ends up taking a strain, it makes a huge difference, especially when you're thinking about like a more acier ship that has high agility to help them evade a lot of shots. That strain token makes that 2 dice feel a little more powerful. And even if they decide to not take a shot on that, leaving that strain on that particular ship can lead another ship to hit that particular ship a little bit harder in the wake, or at least taking away that token, so that way it could potentially take more damage from a future shot. So for that particular reason, because of its ability, I think it actually goes into like a knight category.
So I will challenge the knight category in a minute, but you're basically saying it moves into a different category, right?
Yes.
So now when we talk about Merle, though, Merle also reduces your dice. Why is Merle not part of that category as well?
Because it is initiative 1, and it is a little more difficult to reliably do that with Merle versus a Jingoist that can either bump and still take that and do take another shot somewhere else. And you're able to essentially get 2 Jingoists for the same price as Merle. So they're doubly effective than Merle could be.
Yeah. So, okay. All right. Now we talk about Iden. Iden allows you to spend a charge to live, essentially. You cancel a full-on attack. So you get 1 extra life. So does that take Iden out of that pawn category? Or do we just leave Iden still in the pawn category?
She's a queen. She's a queen in my opinion.
All right. We'll put a pin in that one.
I say that she's I will call her a bishop with an asterisk because she's good right now because of her, right? She has the loadout to help equip a cannon, which can help her punch really hard, much better than any TIE fighter, and that's what makes her really, really good. Her ability is a very nice bonus as well to help her prevent damage. So yeah, I would probably consider her more of a bishop type than a queen, because the double reposition I think is a requirement to be a queen for that. So.
Yep. No, I agree with you on the bishop part. For her, yeah, she's more specialized, so I think definitely falls in that category.
Yes. Okay, so good. So we've kind of defined where that pawn threshold is. It has to be some sort of ability. You want it to be a blocker. I4 is not typically a blocker, so that kind of is why we're ruling ISP Jingoist out of a pawn category. Then you look at your different initial or your different abilities, and the ISP Jingoist offers a special ability that's a little bit over the top, whereas like a Gideon Hass just gets to roll one extra die, right? And that's really doesn't take him out of that pawn category. It just makes him a little bit more valuable of a pawn. Now, let's talk about knights and bishops, because both in the chess world, and I guess I should have explained this earlier, when we talk about value, when I give a value rating, the reason we have value ratings is because when you trade pieces in chess, you want to be able to make sure you're trading over your acquired amount or for a better position. So, for example, you would never trade a queen, which is a value of 9 in chess, for a pawn unless you knew within 2 moves you have checkmate on your opponent. You would never do that. You just would not want to do that. Which I don't know if they actually have any maneuvers in chess where you give up your queen to get checkmate. I don't know. So I don't think that.
Yeah,
I don't think
it's
that's
possible.
It's probably possible, but I've never seen that in a theory. So there you go. Maybe that should be your homework for today, is to find that stupid chess. Where we give up the queen? It's not called Queen's Gambit. All right. Anyway, so the idea behind knights and bishops, and we're going to talk about both of them, I think, at the same time, because they both fit into that 3-point value in a chess, but they both do different things. So a knight is considered a minor piece on the board and has unique movements, allowing them to capture and churn the tide in some sort of a game without being missed if you lose them, right? Or exchange them. They also function as somewhat of a blocker a little bit. So they're a little bit more of a blocker than they are, than they can be. So for example, because they have weird movements, they do L-shaped movements all across the board. It gives them an ability to get in places that are less scripted, I guess is the nicest way to say it, over other pieces, right? They're usually the most forgot about piece in chess when it comes to what maneuver they can do. And they can be highly, highly dangerous. On the other hand, a bishop is considered a minor piece as well, right? Because it is worth 3 points, but they're different than knights. Bishops move as a patrol piece. They're there to screen, which is a little bit different than obstructing. They're there to help keep other players in check for different abilities, right? And they can provide incredible spike damage, and that's an X-Wing term, but they can provide incredible damage output to make a player miserable if they miscalculate. The knight is usually that secret where somebody forgets something based on his movement, whereas a bishop, you know how the bishop moves, you really shouldn't miss a bishop. you shouldn't miss it when a bishop is there, but if you do, the bishop's going to come in and it's going to punish you. They're predictable, but they can be more formidable because of how they move and how far they can move on a board. So for those who don't know how to play chess, a bishop moves on a diagonal. You get 2 of them. They go on each different color, and they essentially can cover the whole board. Now, let's go back, and this is where, when we talked about Iden, right, we said Iden is a more of a bishop piece, right? Yes, and I would agree with that, because she's used as a screen. She can hit you really hard when she wants to, and she doesn't like to die when you want her to die. Or she tells another ship they're not going to die when you want them to die either. Whereas, who did you call out for a knight?
The Jingoist.
Whereas you say a Jingoist is a knight. I feel a Jingoist is a bishop. I'll give my reasoning here in a second, and then we can talk about what knights are. You can rebut me, whatever floats your boat. But a Jingoist, just because of their ability, you know it's coming. You know if you get in range 0 to 1, you know what's going to happen. You know that they're going to screen you. They have predictable movements. They are not double repositioning ships. Therefore, to me, they're more of a bishop, because they're more maybe a control bishop they're there to control where you're going to go on the board, because again, if I move my pawn here, you're going to come up and get it here. I guess I should bring a chessboard up, but you're going to move a pawn here, you're going to bring a bishop up, and it's going to obliterate that pawn if there's nothing else there to get that bishop. So that's why, to me, a jingoist fits more into the bishop category than the knight category.
Well, I mean, the other I think about is that when you boil down the concept of a knight, right, it's most effective is when it's attacking indirectly, right, because it does that L shape, right. The jingoist has that same ability, right, because it's able to still provide a string to a single target, effective at range 0, and still attack a different target, and the original target that received that strain or had the token removed has now suffered can now potentially suffer the effects from another ship that's going to come in. So if that jingoist wasn't there to remove or restrain, then there's a higher probability that that particular ship that would have received that either one of those conditions would have a higher chance of surviving an attack from a different ship. So it does provide more of a benefit. Yes, you can use the jingoist ability and still attack that very same ship. Very useful at range 1, but at range 0, I think that's where it fits more of that knight role. And in the current meta, where you do get that clash in the center when you're contesting objectives between different ships, I feel that it does fit that role more than a bishop would because of that.
I guess the issue I have with that is that they are predictable. You know what they're going to do. If you're the one that puts yourself in that way, you're getting what you expect.
Right.
All right, so let's talk about knights then a second. What would you consider a knight?
A knight, probably ships that can affect other ships indirectly, right? A Commandant Goron on the Empire and the TIE Interceptor, just being able to remove a red token for one of its friendlies and provided a green token, an evade, is very, very strong. If I'm not mistaken, you could do you can remove like an enemy target lock and still give it that, or you remove a stress and do that. And I think that's something that's very much of a knight type move, because knights are also used to protect other pieces in chess. So it's I think that would qualify for like a knight type character.
George, what do you think a knight is? Like, what do you feel?
Well, I need to brush up on my chess knowledge, but to me, I think the way that I would use a knight would probably be something. Your approach is a little bit more indirect. So if I think of a knight, I'm thinking more of like something that's coming towards you from your flank, perhaps. Maybe like something like an interceptor. I think falls more in the category of a knight.
Yeah. All right, so in my world, like, to me, the knight is going to be something that can reposition, right? It's going to be something that is maybe not reposition, but is going to be more volatile-ish, such as like an HMP droid, right? Drone. You get an HMP. An HMP can side slip every other turn, no matter what. An HMP has weird upgrades that allows it to be defensive, allows it to be a neutral piece on the board that doesn't let other things die, because it has attack relay on most of them. Or it could be offensive with multi-missile pods, not really. But it could be offensive with sync laser cannons or any sort of other missiles. And its ability lets you reroll based on how many target locks are on those things. So to me, the knight is going to be that weird position that's a protectorate. So I think Commander Goron kind of fits that. I think Nash Rinwider fits that very well. It's a protectorate piece where it's sitting there. Usually you don't put those in harm's way to say, here, kill this thing, because you put Nash or Goron in the way, they will die. They're typically at the back of the squads or off to the side. I also see Braylon as a knight. And I say that because Braylon, the way those things work is a lot of BS, in my opinion. But a B-Wing has the ability to be a knight because a B-Wing has some very unique maneuvers, right? They have 2 talons, 1 Ks. What are the other turnaround maneuver? Those are the only 2, right? That they have.
Yeah, the 1 talon and the 2 Ks. Yeah.
Yep. And so they have those, but a lot of their abilities have to do with using stress. They're very low agility, so you can take them off the board pretty easily, but they have like a decent amount of health. I mean, 8 health is nothing to shy away from. You aren't going to one shot a B-Wing unless you somehow can shattering shot, trick shot that thing and get a crit chain going. Other than that, you're not killing a B-Wing with one hit, you know. But they do die pretty easily. I see Braylon is because when Braylon defends or performs an attack, if you're stressed, you get to reroll dice. You know, they are maneuverable, so they have the ability to kind of do sideways maneuvers as needed. They have loadout points where you could put afterburners on them, which JJ was very fond of for a long time. That was his favorite thing, other than throwing bombs, which he's a dirty cheater for doing, or a coward. That's what Greg calls you, is a coward.
Hey, I got it. Community. I did it.
You did not. So there you go. So that's kind of how I see Knights. So now if we want to talk, let's talk about other ships, right? And then how they fit into that. So let's go ahead and we're going to clear off the Geonosian. We're going to clear off Nash and Braylon. So I brought Slider up, and the Slider essentially is the same. Every other churn it can do is side sloop. But that's it. Other than that, Slider really isn't that piece. Like, really, when you think about Z95s, most of the time they are pawns, in my opinion.
Yeah. Agreed.
But this C95, I feel, could possibly fit in a crappily. We'll call it a bad night, right? Like, it's a night to some extent.
Night. Yes.
But it's just not the best night that you could have. But in that faction that has no such thing as side slipping, how often are people going to forget that thing can move to the side? I know I did at least 3 times against Sean.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah, it can happen a few times, yeah.
Yeah. Now we have Sarisu, right? Sarisu says, while a friendly ship at 0 to 1 defends, it may re-roll one of its defense dice. Do you consider a Sarisu, George, a knight or a bishop? Or does it not fit in any of those categories?
I would probably consider it a knight. Yeah.
Because it provides the defensive rerolls? Yep. And it has the potential output to destroy you, but it's not a gatekeeper. You're not screening with it, typically. It is meant as it is a piece that dies pretty easily, so, like, if we're being honest.
I actually would consider Sarisu a rook. And the main reason why is that typically in chess, one of the most common moves is a castle maneuver, right? Where you can move over your king 2 spaces and then your rook over it, so that way you essentially protect it from the sides at an angle, right? And the rook is there essentially to protect your critical piece, which is your king in chess. Sarisu kind of fits that bill here because its ability to provide the defensive rerolls to everybody that's at range 1 of it. So if you have a critical piece that you need to survive, having that reroll on defense helps keep that important piece alive. So that way you're able to last a little bit longer and potentially kill other ships. So I feel because of the defensive benefit and also having the ability to reach long distance with a proton torpedo, or you can even equip it with a HLC if you feel more comfortable with that, and have that big explosive attack. The rook can threaten from across the board in chess, and I think that the identity for Sarisu are like a rook piece in chess.
So really, when we get into rook definitions, I define the rook as kind of the cousin to more of the bishop, to be honest with you, than a knight, right?
Okay.
So I guess we'll put a pin in Sarisu a minute. Jesus Christ. We're going to put a pin in Sarisu, and we're going to come back to Sarisu, because I don't agree with you that it's a rook. But we'll come back once we get the rook definition. What other ships do you feel are knights or bishops?
Another knight card I would say would be Hera Syndulla in both iterations, either the B-Wing or the A-Wing. just being able to move by initiative, most of the board has already moved, and being able to provide those tokens to your other ships while she's able to attack as well at higher initiative. I think that she would fit the rook category.
All right. What else? What else comes to mind, George?
As far as a knight goes, I was actually trying to think of like less common factions here, but yeah, it's not working.
All right. How about Culleby? Does Culleby fit that knight? It's tanky. It can move in different ways. It has the ability to perform the barrel roll or boost action, right? And then you get to flip your other upgrade card, right?
Yeah.
It is typically not Culleby is not used as a screening X-wing. It is more of a I'm going to come in as kind of a special character piece inside of here. And I think when we talk about rooks and bishops, I think in fairness, there you go, Nabi. I agree with you. When we talk about rooks and bishops, we talk about a lot of what we have in X-wing, right? Like X-wing is filled with rooks and bishops, in my opinion.
Mm-hmm.
And I say that not very lightly, but if we were to go into, let's pick what about First Order, right? We have Ember. Ember to me is more of a bishop. Ember is a long range attacker, going to keep you in check. When it gets really close, it's probably going to pop, but it's going to be worthwhile trading, right? A-wings, and we could talk about A-wings, and then we're going to say not ZZ.
What about a fireball?
A fireball? Which one? How about Kaz?
Yeah,
Kaz? Yeah. Let's do Kaz. Kaz, in my opinion, is a bishop. I see Kaz as a bishop. And I say that because Kaz gets the extra dice when needed, if it's not damaged. Once you start taking damage and going after them, then Kaz would specifically start to kind of fall apart, right? Like Kaz loses its ability, but at that point, hopefully you've traded enough points, right, for Kaz. If we're talking about Jaeger, I don't know. Jaeger's probably a bishop. What's the cheap one? What's the cheap one that nobody wants to run?
Bucket. R1J5.
Yeah, the bucket droid. That's a pawn. that's a pawn.
Yeah.
It's an expensive pawn, but it's a pawn. You know. And so now how about, and we haven't talked about Finn. We actually haven't talked about Republic at all, too. Let's talk about Finn a minute. Because this one will probably stimulate some discussion points. And then I'll bring up some stuff from more from First Order and more from Republic here. Finn, with its current loadout, would you consider a knight or a bishop?
I would consider him a knight because, number one, he can't move as fast like a bishop should be able to. And his ability does make him fairly defensive as well, and he can do some pretty good damage as well consistently. I think because of his ability, he's definitely higher than what a pawn would be. So I would put him as a knight.
All right. George, what's your thoughts? You look like you're going to disagree here.
Yeah, I think I disagree. I think a more specialized. I think a bishop falls in that category more. Really, it's just I think maybe the cost and the initiative that bumps him down to a bishop, because I don't know about you, I tend to prioritize knights over bishops, I think.
I would probably agree. Do they not have Ahsoka in here? I cannot find Ahsoka in this thing.
And what, Republic or Rebels?
In Republic. Ahsoka doesn't fly in Rebels. Oh, I guess she does. She does. I'm trying. Thank you. I could not get that to come up for reason on my screen. So here we have Ahsoka, right? Ahsoka, are you going to consider Ahsoka a knight or a bishop, George?
Off the bat, I would still say bishop for Ahsoka, but man, that's a hard one. Yes, I think bishop still.
And I would agree with you.
Definitely
It's true,
consider her a
Bobby.
bishop. Yeah.
So I agree with that. It's more of a bishop, even though it does have something that supports it. Now, if we put her in an A-wing, though, do you still consider her a bishop? Or does she even transcend past the bishop and the knight category?
That's toughy. I mean, she does have a lot better loadout value and a higher initiative in the A-wing. Um, I I think she transcends. I think she does because she has the ability to push in damage with the ordnance, and she also is able to coordinate other ships. I think this actually might be. Uh, I don't know. Dare I say a queen?
A queen?
All right. I will 1,000,000% disagree with that. She is
Whoa.
definitely not a queen.
I would at least bump her up to a knight as an A-wing.
Yeah.
Okay.
So in an A-wing, I would almost consider her a rook. So I think we could put a pin in
That too,
hers
yeah.
and come back to that because I think the I-5 plus the loadout value makes her that. I think if you kill her loadout value, she becomes a rook. Then she becomes this high initiative base piece. But with her current loadout, I think she could be easily fit into that rook. But we're gonna get to rook in just a minute. I promise. I'm trying to make sure we cover as many ships as we can. Because I feel that it's important, right? So remember, so JJ's job is to remember Ahsoka, A-wing, and Sarisu. How about Hound? Where does Hound fit this? Is it considered a pawn? Is that what this is? Do we have a pawn that they've given us for 5 points and 1,000,000 loadout?
Ooh, that's tough. Oh man.
Crappy dial, but amazing mechanic. It's the best support piece you're gonna have.
I mean,
in
offensively, unless you equip it with like barrage rockets to like boost its attack, and I mean that's really putting a lot of points to just boost it by one die. His value definitely comes from the support piece. I say it's a I think Bishop is probably the right call.
George?
It's a glorified pawn to me. It's going to go down quick. That thing's not going to stick around too long, in my opinion.
So I agree with you actually on that one. I would almost consider it 2 pawns in one somehow.
Yeah.
But let's talk about that a little bit for a second because I think that brings up an interesting point. And remember at the beginning of this whole segment, what did I say? I said, "Hey, maybe we have a new category that doesn't belong in chess, right? Like, do we have a specialized type of category that chess does not have because they don't have a piece for it?" I'm not sold on that point yet, but hear me out. You have a ship, though. When you pair it with other ships, does it change what it is? So, for example, take Hound and put him with a bunch of V-wings, right? It does okay. You put 7 Fleet Gunner on, you get one little bit of initiative more. But when you put it with Jedis, right? When you put them with Jedis that can eliminate something in 1 turn or 2 turns, you've created an extremely powerful piece. So what if we said Hound is designated a pawn, but based on the support pieces that go with it, moves him into that knight category?
Yeah, I think that's fair.
It's fair.
All right.
I don't
So we
disagree.
still don't have a new category yet. Damn it. All right.
No.
We just have a translucent Hound was what we have, or what do they call those? Shape is a shape changer. Hound's a shape changer, and I would consider all lats to typically be shape changers. Then at that point, all right. What about Rush? Rush has a pretty bloody amazing ability, but you got to get damage to use it. Bishop, Knight, something different.
Gosh, that's tough. Its ability does make it very, very good. I think it's a bad bishop that goes into a good bishop, honestly, or like a really good pawn that turns into a bishop. It's good when it gets damaged, and that's kind of its issue, right? Is that you have to sacrifice basically half of its health in order for it to become I6, and then it becomes a very fragile I6 ship. It can still do some work, obviously, because having Initiative 6 is really good, but I don't think it transcends anything higher than a bishop.
Fair enough. All right. Last one I brought up is Cad Bane, because Cad Bane also presents a very interesting, unique piece, both in Separatist and in Scum. So where do we feel Cad falls? George, your thoughts?
There you go. I think Cad actually falls within the Knight category because of its ability to have all different types of loadouts between bombs or missiles, and which supplements its attack prowess, its ability, native ability to either pass on a token over to another ship, affecting it indirectly, which is right on cue for a Knight, or taking an action after the fact. Again, being very movable. I think that it's a solid Knight.
I'm torn. I think leaning more towards Knight, but also considering it a Rook, depending on the loadout.
Oh. All right. Yeah. See, now you're speaking a little bit more my language. So let's talk about rooks now. Let's talk about rooks. Rooks are the first major piece that you have on your chessboard, right? A rook is different than a knight. It's essentially what I would call a beefier cousin to the bishop. They move in different ways, similar to bishops, so they're still somewhat predictable. They're not an unpredictable piece yet, but they're not meant to patrol like a bishop is. So a bishop is meant to patrol to kind of keep you in check. A knight is meant to kind of be spontaneous, a blocker, provide support, right? A rook is the guy that sits in the background and says, if you come at me, I'm going to punish you. I will 1,000,000% punish you as hard as I can. Right? And it's going to take advantage of the other pieces clearing out space so it can move. It is also, they are designed to come in, right, and help an opponent when it needs it, only to be traded if a more powerful piece, such as a queen, is available to take. Or multiple different pawns, rooks, or pawns, bishops, and knights. So if you could trade a knight for multiple pieces, you're in good shape, right? Rooks will come in. They're going to take and leave their opponent with less of an advantage. They're going to come in and do what is necessary, but only when it is needed. Rooks are part of the endgame piece to some extent, and if they are left to the very last, they will definitely take advantage of you and move your ship to the endgame. So let's roll back to Cad for a second. Cad, Rush is playing checkers. You're killing me with your comments here. I'm very distracted right now. Cad, I feel, fits into the rook category, and I agree that it could have different loadout, but I feel a lot of the other loadouts are very unsuperior to some extent to what Cad is built to do. Not saying it's wrong if you build it with just bombs. As a coordinator, or you're building it with just like tractor beams and ion cannons and ion bombs to stop things. Not saying that those are wrong, but I feel that Cad has a specific value when it brings it into a squad, and I feel the rook piece of it is where it's at. And I guess when we go back to, let's say, an ion cannon, for example, or ion bombs, which is the way Crispy loves to run them, you're using Cad as a control piece, which we don't have in chess control pieces 100% there, because you're trading one for one the majority of the time. Whereas we have, that's the difference between that and X-Wing. We have things that we use as a control style or control method for the game. I believe Cad is a rook, because, especially in Scum, because of the denying of tokens, the fact that you can pass off your negative tokens, and the fact that you can either hit hard or control an opponent to allow the other pieces to attack it. Thoughts?
I think it is on the nail, to be honest. I think that's how he was intended to be played, yeah.
Yeah, I definitely agree with you. I think that the loadout definitely his availability of different options at the loadout value definitely allow him to play that role a lot better. And with the definition of the rook. So yeah, I do have to agree. Yeah.
Now that we have that piece, right? Now that we understand we talked a little bit about what a rook is. And no, we haven't talked about Rook the Gauntlet. I mean, we should probably do that though, because we should probably know where the gauntlets sit in this. But let's talk about Surisu again and Ahsoka, right? So now that we've defined Rook and we've actually defined that piece on the board and how it interacts, JJ, do you still feel Surisu is a Rook?
She's a weaker Rook, but yes, still a Rook.
All right, I'm going to disagree with that hardcore, but that's okay. How about Ahsoka? Do we feel Ahsoka's a Rook? George.
Ahsoka A-Wing?
Yes, A-Wing. Only the A-Wing version.
Only the A-Wing. Decisions here. Man, I'm going to say yes on this one.
All right. So we still feel that Ahsoka's a Rook. Okay. And I will tell you, I feel Ahsoka fits into the Rook role better than Surisu does. And JJ, I apologize, but I just don't feel the Surisu is a Rook, because Surisu, I've watched Surisu die in one shot, just done and gone, even with rerolls. I've actually made Surisu die in one shot last week, without the rerolls. So. So I agree that it could that the style of it, but I don't feel with its health value that it allows it to be that Rook piece that we're looking for because of the dial.
And like, I don't know, it's just a feeling towards me, like the way that I feel also, because feeling does come into it too, right? Like you feel better having Ahsoka later towards the game than you would if you had Sirisu, in my opinion. Like that's just how I would feel about the game. So I think,
and that's true. And I do think Ahsoka is kind of a borderline Rook as well. Like I would consider her a bishop more or less, but depending on your play style and depending on how you move and use Ahsoka, could depend on her being a Rook. And I say that because I played a guy that plays Han, one of the VCXs. I can't remember the name of it now. The traitor guy, whatever the traitor guy's name is from Rebels. What's that guy's name? It's not Vizier. It's a traitor. Callus.
Callus.
Yeah. Callus, Han, and Ahsoka. Like a 3-ship list like that. And like in that list, Ahsoka is definitely more of a Rook than anything else. So, all right. What else? What other Rooks do we have? What other things fall into that Rook category?
Well, I think the gauntlets actually fit that role because they have the ability to carry different crew, that increases their efficiency for that, and late game that large health on those big gauntlets can do a lot of work, and do a lot of damage. So yeah, I would say that the gauntlet itself will probably be under that category.
Do you feel the gauntlet is a Rook no matter what pilot it is, or do different pilots fit into different categories?
I mean, barring the generics, yeah, I think so. I think across the board, I can't really think of like a deviation on the pilot, but I'll probably have to check the list of different pilots there. But I think that across the board, yes.
I think so too. Just because of they're just going to stay on the board for quite a bit. It does feel bad losing them because of their costs, but yeah, that's. I think all around, all across the board, I think they're the Rooks.
All right, cool. What about Eamon Azamine? Rook, bishop, knight. Where do you feel Eamon falls in here?
Assuming that you're bringing Eamon for the bombs and not just to have an I4 fire spray, he falls within the knight category, because his main objective in the game is to try to hit you with as many bombs as possible, and his ability does help facilitate that. So I think that's probably the correct role for Iman.
All right. George?
I would say Bishop for Iman.
Ooh,
He's very specialized. I think Iman can cause havoc. His approach is pretty straightforward. You kind of know what he's going to do. So yeah.
Gatekeeper. So would you also consider baby Boba, or whatever we want to call young Boba, young man Boba, a bishop as well, and not fit into that rook category?
Yeah, I mean, his ability, you have to get his ability to work very, very reliably, and even then, I don't think that it will push him into the rook category. I think that he fits more as a knight.
All right. How about Chewbacca in the YT 1300? We've seen Chewbacca just show up randomly.
Are we talking about Rebel or Resistance?
Resistance. Sorry.
Yes, as a rook, yes. The Resistance Chewie, I absolutely think that is a rook. Yeah,
I would agree. Yeah.
Yeah. And I think the ability piece of it is kind of what pushes that into there because of what it can do. How about Leia in Rebels?
Yeah, definitely a rook. Her ability with the Force, being able to take on other Force users, being able to provide actions on a red turn or on a red maneuver for your other ships. Definitely a really good late game piece. And at Initiative 5, she's going to be doing quite a lot of work. So yeah.
All right. How about Covenel? That's an interesting one, right?
Mm-hmm.
I love Kova.
Because Kova can be both, right? Because Kova fits into aggressive attacking as well as a coordinator.
I think more of a bishop because it's more attack oriented, rolling extra dice. But yeah, you're right. The coordinate ability is just it's really good. But I think you bring Nova as a solid like third ship to help attack and also do that coordinating, which can be more offensive minded. So I think it fits more into a bishop role than the rook.
Fair enough. How about Mace Windu? These are the last two we'll do, and then we're going to move on to Queen.
Bishop, I think. More offensive minded, I would say. Knife fighter.
Yeah.
All right. How about Von Reg?
Probably a bishop as well.
See, I disagree with that one. I think I see Von Reg as a rook.
A rook?
Yes. With health, though, I mean, Von Reg with a single Pro Torp.
You're right, but if your Von Reg's taking a Pro Torp, you probably have a problem.
Yeah, that's a strike with no shaft.
Oh my god. I don't know.
Oh man.
I see it because of his ability, right? You get to transfer a token. He has double reposition. He's not quite a queen, in my opinion. We'll get to queen in a second. I think that kind of leads us into the queen discussion. He has the fine-tuned thrusters, which make him so much more able to do it. And then he has the loadout points, in extended to take a hull and a shield upgrade. in standard, it does crazy. Not. So I see him as a rook because he hits hard. He's an end game piece, and he's one that will close it out for you. Which now kind of leads us into queens. And JJ, if you want to start queuing up some people you think are queens, then we can argue about those, which is fun. To me, the queen is the quintessential piece that everybody knows in chess. It is your second major piece on the board, right? It is probably the second most valuable piece that you'll have, and you cannot sacrifice it without... Just wait, Nabi, we'll get to kings. You cannot sacrifice it without taking other valuable pieces along with it. Otherwise, you could lose the game. This piece is so valuable. It has the ability to maneuver around the board and basically like every other piece but a knight. It can move any which way. You can trade it, obviously, with value and strategy, but without this piece, the player will have a less of an advantage and your opponent will have higher of an advantage to win. This piece is extremely versatile and can be used in many different situations. Now, I'm going to go ahead and define king a minute, and then I think we're going to come back to the queen king thing, because I think, especially based on what Navi is saying, there could be some discrepancy between what we see as kings and queens. A king is obviously the most important piece on the board. If you lose this piece, the match is over, right? In chess, game is immediately over. It doesn't contribute a lot. It just sits there as a tank for the whole game. This piece is considered to be one that you would keep alive to the end game, obviously to win. Now, I feel in X-Wing, our kings are a little bit different, right? Because you don't automatically lose a game per se if it's over, but your probability should be over 90%. We'll just call it 90%. If it's over 90%, you're going to lose. If you lose this piece, it becomes a king. I will also say the big difference between a king and like X-Wing is the maneuverability piece. We need to take that out of it, because kings in chess move one space. That's it. Except for when you castle. When you castle, it's different. And in reality, there would technically be 0 kings, because there's almost nothing that moves one space and is the most valuable thing in the world in X-Wing. But so for
Fenrir shuttle.
Fenrir shuttle. All right. No, I disagree with you, but okay. That's to some extent a pretty good example though, right? Because you have something that if it does lose the game, you don't lose the game though. In a what do we have? Fen, Cullaby, Wedge, Luke game. Your king does. If you lose Fen, it doesn't matter. You have the other 3 X-Wings that will destroy the shit out of you. So essentially, a king is what you want to protect over your queen, right? But the queen is going to be more versatile. So does everybody agree or feel that that is a proper analogy to both of those?
Yeah, I agree.
Okay.
I agree.
Now, let's talk about Boba Fett and Scum, because this one will probably merit the most discussion out of all the pilots you have up there, maybe other than Vader. This is going to merit the most discussion on whether Boba is a queen or a king. George, you go first.
Boba's king, in my opinion. You lose Boba, you're done. Might as well just forfeit the game.
All right. JJ?
I disagree. I think it depends highly on the list, because yes, he has 9 points, right? However, that does leave a lot of room open for another big ship that can go in and be as effective as Boba and helping either control objectives or to hunt down other ships. I mean, you look at half of the gauntlets; they're very, very good there. Dengar, also another really great piece. I think Dengar probably fits the king piece more than Boba because of his effectiveness in offense. Boba, while is really great at punching in, being at range 0 has an inherent risk of damaging itself, being susceptible to having all those range 1 shots.
And we lose JJ again.
Oh no.
Yep, there you go. It's in his name to get those range 1 shots and try to use his ability as much as possible to like get those shots in there. So I think that because of that, that makes Boba more of a queen than a king in that case.
All right. So I'm going to agree with both of you, and I think Nabi says it best. Boba plus second fire spray. When one dies, when both are queens, when one dies, the other becomes king. And I think with Boba Fett, I would actually say that is very true. So then we can move on to Wedge. I would argue Wedge is a rook. So, I actually don't believe Wedge.
I don't know.
I
I
don't
don't
believe
know.
Wedge
So
is a queen.
so here's my defense of Wedge as a queen, right?
All right.
If you see a Wedge across the board, you're immediately planning everything and trying to take out Wedge, right? Because if you don't, just like a queen, Wedge can strike and take out any of your ships, right? Because his ability, especially with a proton torpedo coming away from it, is going to be good. Wedge can then fly away if he needs to, disengage and make you chase it. And it's because the queen is probably the most valuable piece on the board. I think Wedge does fit that ability. Granted, he's not as versatile as like a Boba Fett in terms of defense or getting a reliable boost all the time as an action. But I think that his ability, his presence on the board, if you're facing off a rebel list that has Wedge, Wedge is going to be a priority because you may not have enough time for your ships to survive to turn your attention to him later on in the game. And if he's an end game piece left on the board against your ships, you're in trouble because he is very capable out the rest of your list if you leave him to the end.
Rooks are part of the end game as well, and if left last, they will allow you to have more advantage in the end game than your opponent.
I don't know.
That's what I wrote. That's what it came from.
It's a very high tier rook for sure. I don't think he loses you the game if you do end up losing like Wedge. So I don't think he's high enough to be a queen in my book.
Yeah, I would agree with that. Vader is the king. I don't care what point cost he's at. I think Vader is a king. I'm sorry. Like if you lose Vader, you pretty much lose the king game.
I actually meant to put TIE Advanced Vader instead of Defender Vader.
Okay.
I do agree that Defender Vader is a king. Yeah,
TIE Advanced Vader, I will agree with you as a queen.
Yeah.
Damn, that's a great ship painting idea. Who wants to make my Vader Defender look like a queen? Seriously. who wants to commission this shit? I have like I have 2 specially painted Vaders, but I would take a third Vader X1. I have like 5 of them. So I will take another one painted as a queen. So if anybody wants to hit me up later, let's discuss painting Vader as a queen. Ooh. All right.
That would be great.
So Defender Vader is a king. We could just move on from that. Anakin is unique, right? Because does Anakin fit into the king category, or is it more of a queen category?
When you compare it across the other factions, I think it's a queen. You're not going to lose the game if you lose Anakin. The Republic has a lot of other ships that can put out a lot of damage in addition to what Anakin does. Yes, he is probably the better out of all those ships, but if you lose Anakin, you're not losing the game. So for that, I think that Anakin is a queen.
George?
I tend to agree. You're always looking out for where the queen is and what the opponent can do with the queen, and I think Anakin falls in that category. So for sure, yeah, definitely a queen.
All right. What about Poe? I think I feel Poe's a queen. I guess
yeah.
No matter which one it is, I feel Poe's always a queen.
Yeah, agreed. Both versions are queens. Yes.
How about Jango Fett? That's an interesting dilemma too, because technically there's enough in Separatists. If you lose Jango, you could still win. But that's a hard one.
I think George is probably more qualified for this, judging on your list. What do you think, George?
Man, I would still say that if I end up losing, that it also depends on when I lose Jango. Losing him late game, done. He's a king. I think once I lose him, he's gone. I can't come back from that. It just depends when I lose him.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think I think that if you're making it either into a 3-ship list, right, like 2 fire, something else, he's definitely a king. Same thing if you're filling it out with a bunch of droids, it's still your heaviest hitter. Yeah, I definitely have to agree that I think Jango's is the king. Yeah.
How about Kylo Ren? I think in both fields
Because of
he
his-
fits queen.
Yeah, because of his points cost. Well, yeah, I think he's still queen either way. I mean, because it's 7 points versus 6 points on either side.
The question,
you
though,
still
is
have a lot of other options.
can you build enough around him to do enough damage? If you lose Kylo, you win. That's the key.
Yeah,
Okay.
exactly. Yeah, it does heavily depend on what pilots are going around him to help support him, because you can set him up as a queen piece, or you can set him up as a king piece as well, just depending on what other ships are in that list. So yeah, he's highly dependent on that. Yeah.
George, what about ZZ? We're gonna give it to you so you could piss Nobby off. Where do you feel ZZ falls into this one?
Oh, we got a big fan of ZZ here. ZZ, I'm gonna have to go Rook on this one.
Oh,
Oh no, that's too high
Wow.
praise. I still
Oof.
think it's a bishop.
No,
You shoot one
what?
procket. You shoot one
No.
procket, and that's it.
Nope.
You're done.
All right. So I'm gonna give my defensive ZZ as a queen. I feel ZZ's a queen. Period. I believe the ability makes ZZ a queen, and unless you fly ZZ like shit, ZZ never dies, ever. I would consider Rook to some extent, just because of what it is, but because of ZZ's maneuverability, personally, and the ability to upgrade a lot of these things. Yes, you're right. A procket means nothing, but have you ever tried cluster missiles on ZZ? Has anybody ever actually done that? Has anybody ever actually taken ZZ and done anything other than prockets? Well, I know somebody that has. But I feel I'm going to go with ZZ as a queen. Even if it's a low ranking queen, that's kind of what I feel with. I would accept Rook as an answer for 200 points as well. But how about Ray then? Let's classify Ray. You feel ZZ's a bishop. What about Ray?
What's Ray's points right now? 7 or 8?
8.
8.
You can still fit a bunch of Y wings on there.
I would definitely categorize her more in the queen category, because often enough, I guess Django can also fall in this, but yeah, you're pairing her up with another strong ship like Poe or something like that. So I think, yeah, she's a queen.
Yeah, I have to agree.
What about Grievous, baby? What is Grievous?
Get back in the knight category. Come on.
Oh,
No.
all right. Hold on.
No.
All right,
He's
we're
a
muting
Rook.
JJ. We just muted JJ. Don't worry. He can't
He's
talk
a
at all for the
Rook.
rest of the podcast.
Yeah.
George, where do you feel Grievous fits in at?
Confidently can say he's a Rook. 100%.
All right. So what would move him out of up to the queen category then?
If he had maybe a higher pilot skill, obviously that would bump him up in points, but I think higher pilot skill would definitely consider him a queen.
All right, JJ, where do you feel Grievous comes in at?
Definitely a Rook. In order for it to be a queen, it has to have more.
He has to not breeze up on us. All right, last one we have is Luke, and I kind of started the show off saying Luke was a queen, in my opinion. While JJ reboots, George, your thoughts on Luke?
Yeah, I would agree. It hurts to lose Luke, just like it would a queen. Yeah, that's my opinion. I think his ability is too strong. You don't want to lose him at all. He's hard to kill, but yeah, his point cost is what bumps him up to a queen. Otherwise, I would put him as a Rook, to be honest.
Yeah, and I think we can agree most of the X-wing pilots would be considered Rooks.
Yeah.
Most of the time, that's kind of where they fit into. I think ZZ, like I said, ZZ on the other hand, or not ZZ, well, ZZ, yes, but Luke on the other hand has that ability that is just so prevalent. Like you can lose him. It's not the end of the world if you do, but you really better trade him for something good. Otherwise, you're going to regret that. And if you lose both Wedge and Luke at the same time, you're just screwed.
Yeah.
All right. So now we're going to get into list building a little bit. right? So I commissioned, and so this is how likely I like to plan. I commissioned to get unique lists, and I asked for unique lists specifically because I wanted to have a conversation about them, right? I wanted to talk about unique lists. I think JJ's frozen still.
No, I'm here.
Okay, good. I wanted to talk about unique lists, and then I kind of want to talk about how the different pieces that we just talked about fit into these lists, right? And the reason I asked for unique lists over meta list was because I think it's interesting when we talk about what we like to fly or what we're building that's like unique and fun and great. You would really, really, really love to put on the table and be competitive. But at the same time, nobody's flying that style of list. And I think it's interesting when we talk about these different pieces and how they go together, because I think next week when we get into how do these pieces list building get together and fit together, we could talk a little bit more in depth about it. But I feel when we talk about these unique lists, I think they kind of give us a little bit of insight into how somebody's building a list, right? So to begin with, the first list we have comes from Let the Wookiee Win, from the Nickel City League and from Nickel City Squadron, or I don't know. Do we have a Nickel City Alliance? Is that like how this works? Like we all part of the Nickel City squad now? All right, cool.
Yeah. Team Havoc.
So, yeah. So anyway, Chris gave us a unique list, which I've definitely honestly never seen. So the first piece of that is Luke, right? And we already considered Luke a queen. We don't even have to talk about what Luke is trick shot, shattering shot, proton torp Luke. So there you go. That's done and over with. That piece is standard. We then have Kraken with elusive and plasmas, Fen with the child and R4 astromech, and then Ezra and the gauntlet with Notorious, R2D2, Veteran Tailgowner, Contraband, and Night Brother. So we have a rook and a queen that we've already defined. We now have Fen and Kraken. Where do you all feel these fit?
Overall, I do like this list a lot. You do have you have your queen and Luke, and then you have your rooks and Ezra and Fed Rao, and then Iron. I'm not sure how I would classify Iron. I mean, typically when you think of a Z95, you think of it as a pawn, but Iron's ability to coordinate and also like shoot pretty good kind of elevates this more into like a bishop type role, I would say. So I think that's where I would place Iron Kraken at as a bishop.
Yeah. So a bishop, Fen would probably also fall in that category of either a knight or a bishop.
See, I would see Fen as a knight.
Knight, yeah. Okay.
Yeah. I would see Fen as setting up not as much the blocks, but setting up the rest of the team to be able to take out the opponent. So JJ, you like the list a lot. What is Ezra's ability, and how is there anything unique about his ability interactions with the rest of the team here?
Well, I would look as Ezra is probably the objective getter in this game. This is the ship that's going to last the longest. It's going to matter in the end game because of its large amount of hull or health rather for this one here, and his ability allows it to remain it very defensive, especially if you're doing a full stop, being able to use contraband cybernetics in those moments to either like take an action to claim an objective. Or take a target lock and then use Night Brother to get that focus. You can end up double modded. And then his ability allows you to change two focus results into either hits or evades on offense or defense. So his shot can be the finisher after Luke and Iron has had their time to take their shots at a particular enemy there. So very, very solid rook on this one, I think, just because of its potential to matter later on in the game. And if your opponent decides to try to take out Ezra early on, it has the rest of the list to contend with, and it's going to be very difficult to take Ezra down.
All right, cool. So I like this list too. I think this is a very interesting take on a lot of the other lists that kind of we've been seeing. And I think this would be very unique to put into on the tables for Rebels. And Chris, if you're listening and you put it on the table, we'd love to know your thoughts back against this. And maybe this is something we'll see in Nickel City League next month.
Yeah.
All right. The next one is called CIS Bruisers. It's from Crispy. George, why don't you? Does George even have access to any of these lists?
No.
No.
All right. So JJ, you go ahead and read this one, and we'll go from there.
Sure thing. Let me just pull this up here. Stand by. I have a delay on my end.
All right.
So it's we got Django Fett here in the fire spray with Trick Shot, Jamie Bean, Savage Press, Electro Traff, Contraband, the Title, and Veteran Tail Gunner, Grievous without Maneuver, Impervium, and then Pre Vizsla with Marksmanship, Bo-Katan, Veteran Tail Gunner, Death Watch Commandos, and the Swivel Wing. I think you have a case here of 2 Rooks guarding their queen in Django Fett. A very solid archetype, definitely a lot of shots that can be taken by both the queen and the Rooks. And it's going to force your opponent to make different decisions. These are ships that can last a long time and that can put out a lot of damage.
So, George, what's your feel on this one?
I actually played against this. I tested it out against Crispy. Pretty solid list. Do Death Watch Commandos count as little pawns?
Yes,
I would say so. Yeah. So yeah, him dropping those in the middle of the field to just kind of to get more arcs on my ships was pretty interesting, because you don't want to shoot at the little pawns, but then if you leave them hanging, they're just gonna get you. So it was an interesting list. But I would agree in the 2 Rooks and a Queen, basically.
All right, fair enough. The next one is from Sandy. This is a Dengar Q9 Emun list. Emun has Proxies, Gamut, FTC, Marauder, Skilled Bombardier to make Emun even more angrier than he usually is. The Child on Q9, the Mandos, BT1, Babu Frank, and the Razor Crest. And can we start calling him Babu Frank? Like, can we just do that? Like, can that be his new nickname? Is Babu Frank? Hey, Frank. Right, sorry.
He's your oldest friend. Yes.
Then Dengar with Notorious, Proton Torpedoes, Contraband, Boba Fett Gunner, which I think that's this has got to be an extended list, right? Is Boba Fett Gunner?
He's the baby Boba.
Okay. All right. Punishing 1 and R3. So what do you feel about this one? So to me, so you have Dengar. So everybody's worth 7 to 6. Emun, I think we classified as definitely not a queen or a king. Q9 is kind of the same thing. I feel Dengar in this one. There's that possibility. I think those Proton Torps are very aggressive on Dengar, right? And that means Dengar has a purpose to joust you, to get in your face, and hopefully not die. Am I incorrect in saying that? Like, that's what that feels like, right?
Yeah.
No, you're absolutely right there. And I think this is similar to like the Crispy list where we have 2 Rooks trying to protect the queen to come in there and take it out. I don't think that if you lose Dengar in this particular list that you're automatically lose the game. Q9 and Emun are still very, very strong ships. They're not going to produce as much offense as Dengar does, but they're there to help take away some of the fire from Dengar and try to win the game that way.
Yeah, I agree.
Right.
Like, my eye would be on Dengar on this list. Like, try to take him down before he does any sort of punishment on you.
Shenanigans.
Yeah.
All right. The next one is called Boba Bus. Came from us from a new reviewer, Rizzle. they have a Cad Bane, Boba Fett, and Lots Razi list.
Yeah, definitely an interesting list here. I mean,
Are you going to read it, or are you just going to let us like imagine it? All right.
Sorry, I'm loading up the list here myself here.
Okay,
But yeah,
so here
there
we
go.
go.
Cad
I'll read
Bane
it.
in the rogue class. Yeah, go ahead.
You're killing me, JJ.
Sorry, dude.
All right, so we have
Go ahead.
Cad Bane with Ion Cannon, HLC, Xanadu Blood, Proxy Mines, and Zuckuss. Boba Fett with Notorious, Proxies, FTC, Marauder, Veteran Tail Cunner, and Perceptive Copilot. Lots Razi with Ketsu, Ahsoka, and Contraband.
Honestly, I think this is a case where it feels like Boba Fett is the king in this particular list here. I don't feel confident that Cad Bane and Lots can carry the rest of the game if Boba goes down. I guess it would just depend on the list that it's facing, mainly because Lots doesn't have the ability to like continuously keep time on target, even though it has a 180-degree arc. But once you get behind Lots, you're just gonna have a hard time keeping time on target. And Cad Bane, as good as he is, not having the ability to do a hard turn with if it's stressed to clear that, is also going to have a hard time keeping time on target there as well. So it feels like Boba is the strongest point of this particular list, and if he goes down, then it's going to be a tough time for the rest of the list.
I mean, I would say Boba is definitely the king for sure, based on just the sheer number of points. However, I also feel like that's a trap, like going after Boba, based on the setup and everything else that's going on. Because if you leave that Lats Razzie hanging around, even though you're able to kind of dodge arcs kind of fairly easy, it's not a very maneuverable ship. If you leave that hanging on your flank for whatever reason, you're just gonna have a bad day. But yeah, other than that, like it's Boba's the king, stays king.
Yeah, and I think I agree with you with that. I mean, because you have Lots Razi with Ketsu, right? And at the start of the end phase, you may choose an enemy at range 0 to 2 near fire units. If you do, it doesn't remove a tractor token, right? Though, where are they getting the tractor tokens from?
From Lots. Lots' ability, you can spend a target lock they have on a ship and assign an attractor token.
Awesome. Actually, that's even better. So there you go. So you have Boba's king, which I agree 100% with. You lose Boba, this list falls apart. But at the same token, like George said, it is a trap. If you get into there and you try to take Boba out and you can't, you're screwed, because here comes Lats from one side and Cad from the other side. And I think Cad in this list is a solid rook, because you have a neutralizer as well as a heavy hitter. And I do feel as long as, if Boba passes, as long as there's enough that he takes with them, then Cad can close it out. Lots cannot, though. But Lots has a sweet mechanic. Think about Lots coming in from that side with Boba in the center, and Lots comes in on that side and just tractors you. Oh, man. Can you imagine Boba's just going to eat you alive?
And he's got proxy mines too, so you got to watch out for that.
Tasty. All right. Next one is Nobby's Nonsense. What? We have a Ray Poe ZZ list. ZZ with Magpulse warheads, shield upgrade because you got to keep it alive. Ferrosphere paint, which we're going to talk about Ferrosphere paint in a second because I love that card. And I've been using that card since Crossroads. But then we have Poe in the T-70 with Ferrosphere paint again, munitions failsafe, overdrive thrusters, proton torpedoes, R4, and Predator, and Black 1. So there is no heroic here. Then we have Ray, which I'm thinking the X-Wing gods here, because there's no Finn on this list at all. And I hate Finns so much. We have Ray, though, with heightened perception, trick shot, Rose, Holdo, and Ray's Millennium Falcon.
Remind me what Holdo does again.
Well, we could bring that card up, right? Holdo is the one that allows you to transfer tokens from one to the other.
Okay.
Oh, I
That's
should
what I thought,
probably
okay.
hold on. Let me.
So
There you go.
So side note on that particular interaction, this is something that's actually been discussed on a few of the rules forums recently. So essentially, as it's ruled currently, you can. So if an enemy target locks, let's say Poe, and Ray's in range, you can use Holdo to now transfer that lock. Sorry. If somebody target locks Ray and Poe's in range, you can essentially have Holdo transfer that lock over to Poe, and Poe can pass over another token. Then Ferrosphere Paint will trigger at that point, and if they don't have Poe in Bullseye, then they either have to take a stress or break the lock. So that's a nice little interaction there for this particular list here. That being said, this feels like a more balanced list. I mean, I think you have two queens in this particular list, and with a solid bishop
I think
being
got
able
three
to.
queens in this list.
Yeah, I was gonna say, according to earlier, we have 3 queens.
No, you guys decided Zizi was a queen. I did not agree to that. No, heck no.
That's because you don't see the power of ZZ. You, my friend.
I do, but green dice
ZZ
are green
blind.
dice. And I
right.
honestly think this is actually a good list. I do like that interaction of Holdo with Ferrosphere Paint. I don't think it's bad at all. Absolutely.
Nope, and that's hilarious. I did not know that Holdo. I didn't know you could do that, and that's some cheeky shit right there. That's some scummy stuff. Just saying.
It is.
All right. The next one we have is from Jedi Alex 1. We have Anakin, a Delta 7 with Shattering Shot, Trick Shot, Extreme Maneuvers, and R7A7. That is a very 4-star of Luke. Barriss Ophi in the 7B with Brilliant Evasion and R2D2. Mace with Heightened Perception, R4P17, and CLT. And then Ahsoka with CLT, R2C4, which we don't see very often, and Heightened Perception.
Yeah, I'm curious about the R2C4 selection in this particular one, because that's the one that you can spend an evade token to change a focus into a hit. Other than that, I mean, yeah, Anakin obviously is the queen, and this one here, even if you lose Annie, you're not losing the game, and you still have very capable fighters in Barriss, Mace, and Ahsoka. Barriss and Mace probably feel more like Rooks in this case. I don't know. That's a stretch, I think. And then Ahsoka is a solid bishop.
Yeah, I don't see Mace as a Rook. I see I see Mace coming in as a bishop most of the time.
Do you think Barriss also comes in as a bishop as well?
I think with this build, it does. I think if you drop Brilliant Evasion, and do a different upgrade, I think it changes some of that a little bit. But I guess she doesn't really honestly have any other points. I like the R2D2 build. Actually,
I mean, it is a 7B, so it is a little more tankier than the Delta 7s.
She is a possible. The problem is because she's only an I4. If she was an I5, I would easily put her as a Rook. Like, honestly, like she would easily fit that Rook. I think the Brilliant Evasion, I think you trade it in for patience, and really she becomes a bishop for you. It's really weird not having a Hound in this list. I've never ran Ahsoka 7B, or I'm sorry, Barriss 7B, but it makes sense. And this is where I wish we had like team up cards, right? So like we can have a Barriss Ahsoka team up card, and then like if it's like at the end game, flip this card if you're at round 8, and Barriss then can only attack Ahsoka. Barriss turns on you. We could have so much fun with that. All right, next list I have, and this will be our last list that we have, is I3 scum list that JJ did not invent, but
yes,
we both have faced this list actually, like on TTS.
Oh,
like,
you did too?
Yeah, I played against somebody that played this almost exact list. I don't know if it's exact the same list, but it's very close to the same list. This is a Gamut with Protectorate Gleb, Deadman Switch, Manaru with Notorious, Gar-Saxon, R5P, B, and Contraband and Punishing 1, Leighton with Crackshot and Heavy Laser Cannon, Quinn Jest with Crackshot and Thread Tracers, and then Lots Razi with Enduring, which I don't remember being on there, but could have been, Fen Rao, Ketsu, Contraband, and Houndstooth for the hell of it.
Yeah, this list surprised the hell out of me when I faced it. The again that Lats Razi combo of being able to get tractor tokens off the target locks works really, really well, especially with Quinn Jost that can actually use his ability to reload the thread tracers and making sure that everybody has target locks on them from this one. The other spicy part of this particular list too is Garth Saxon on Manaru being able to spend somebody else's target lock on that ship to add that fourth die. And it is really, really strong, especially if you manage to get that that Lot's tractor off into Manaru's arc. My goodness, Manaru is punishing after Lots gets that ability off there. And Gamiki, of course, is there just to support the other ships there to make sure that they have the tokens that they need there. This, I mean, when you compare it to other ships, these ships feels like a bunch of like knights and bishops, but when you put them together, they feel like they're better, like than we see them individually, and that's what makes it hard to like qualify this particular list.
Yeah, I flew the Pre-Vizsla Grievous Django list against this, and only lost because they were able to take out Pre-Vizsla at the very end. But
Wow.
This is a dirty list. Like this list, and this list, if you look at this, you would be like, who would run this? Like I the first thing, like they put this on the board, I literally discounted this list. I was like, you gotta be kidding me. And then they were telling me like a lot of it's because the initiatives line up. And that was why. No. That's false. That is 100%. That is not why. Like when I found out that Gar Saxon could take the lock, somebody else's lock, so they just like I couldn't figure out why everybody was just target locking. Well, I figured out why after that. Like after that was pretty easy.
Yeah.
So I don't know if I would say this is all an all of Rook list, but I would definitely say this is like none of these are pawns in this list, and none of them are queens or kings. This is a very heavy knight, bishop, rook list. And I feel that. Go ahead.
Who's your rook in this list?
I feel Manaru's your rook in this list.
Yeah.
That's to me, Manaru's the rook in this list. And before I would never consider Manaru a rook, really. But I feel in this list, Manaru's a heavy rook. If you try to kill him right away, you regret it. We'll just put it that way.
Yeah. Okay.
But that's interesting because that's who you want to kill first. But yeah.
Is definitely not if you're looking, and this gets into other things that we could talk about in later episodes. Mm-hmm. But that's not the person you want to kill first. You want to remove Lots and Quinn Jest immediately. Like Quinn Jest, like really Quinn Jest. I didn't know you could I was crack shotted on a fucking thread tracer. Excuse my language, but I was like, what are you doing? Oh, that's right. And then here comes Gar Saxon. Oh, here we go. I'm just going to take that lock and, I get 4 dice now. Oh, next turn, 4 dice. It's like, oh, you got to be kidding me. You got to absolutely be kidding me.
Yeah, it's a interesting situation because, like, your first instinct is to go for Manaru, but, like, again, sort of like that other list we were looking at with Boba Fett being the trap. Manaru is the trap in this case because, yeah, the support ships are hanging around, and they got to go down.
Yeah. And Manaru somewhat does fill that king role a little bit. Like, if you do lose Manaru in this list, I think this, like, as long as you haven't lost a lot of ships, you are going to have a hard time with this list taking the rest of the game with it. Like, you really are. But if Manaru and the rest of the squads are able to take out, let's say, half of your list, like 8 points of your list, you lose. It's not even a question at that point. I like that list though, and I am very I just don't have enough time to play things. I really want to put that list on the table though. Like that list was so fun. To watching somebody fly that list against me, I was like, I was seriously cursing the whole time in my head.
Yeah.
Yeah, I gotta hide that list. I'm sure a couple of locals here would want to fly that.
Yeah, if
I
Charles
mean,
were
you
here
can-
tonight,
You can find your planning phase syndicate YV as lots. Just saying.
that's right.
Oh,
You
there we
have
go.
that. Oh, so jealous. So jealous. You know what I need? I need a planning face, and I should. That's right. I really just need to get back with Pim and pay him the money to paint my one of my fire sprays, planning face syndicate fire spray, because like I actually fly fire sprays all the time, like all the time. So
Yeah.
well, all right. Well, thank you so much, George, for joining us tonight. It was a pleasure to have you on to talk a little bit about things outside of just our tournament and Nova and stuff like that, and to get like a different perspective on how we see different theories inside of it. Do you have anything you want to plug real quick before we take off? Is there anything on your docket that you didn't have?
No, I'm good. I appreciate you guys having me on it again here. I feel welcome, so
Yeah.
appreciate it.
Awesome. Well, quick
Yeah.
shout out or quick reminder, if you're still listening or still watching, we have Michigan GT X-Wing Championship. And George, you should fly up for this. It would be fun to hang out with you in person. You're not allowed to fly your list, though, to win against us. But you can pick a different list to win against me with. We have a tournament coming up October 1st, which is a Saturday in Lansing, Michigan. Ticket prices are $40, but there is insane amount of prize support. Essentially, the way it's going to be done is we have a Mandalorian kit. We have, I believe, 15 to 17 people signed up currently right now. I haven't checked in a while, but we have 15 to 17 people signed up. And essentially what's going to happen is it's an extended tournament with the band list. But you're able to basically come, everybody will get some sort of prize. And then what we've done is basically every time we hit 5 more people, we add a set dollar amount to the prize support. And what'll happen is at the beginning of the day, when we find out how many people are there, me and Ken and one of the other guys are going to go purchase stuff for prize support. So you should be walking away with at least half of your ticket price in prize support, no questions asked. So with that being said, if you would like to, please come play against me and beat my ass, especially if you live in Canada or Indiana or Ohio or Wisconsin or Chicago. Come beat me. I will not be flying. I don't know. Maybe I think I'm gonna be flying my fun list. We never got to my fun list. We never did. But it's after 11, and I feel it's probably time.
Send me that list
in the show. So
send me that separate list.
I will. I'll send it to you. We'll have a conversation about it in a second here, George. So, for anybody else that's wondering, maybe if you want to join our Patreon, we have a Patreon only thing. I'll give away all the weird, crazy lists that we build in the background that we have that we never get to play, except for this one. So, that being said, thank you all. Have a good night. We will be back next week, Sunday, 9 p.m. Eastern, with another show where we'll be talking more about chess theory and how it applies to X-Wing. With that being said, have a good night and see you later.
See ya.